some of us don't even see what's happening around us. Again, I give thanks to the Black Christ Order. Yeah, I don't like to debate people. I don't like to fight people. And as you can see, I don't like to argue with people how they believe and whatever. But I'm telling you, the time gonna come when our falsehood will fall. You think all we talking about all them years is for a joke? Not because we're not forcing nobody to be this, but this is it. All them other belief is waste of time. Eh? This is it. I telling you, you can say what you want and feel in your business that this is it. I have to tell you something. When the time comes, you can't say. I never say. Remember, your brother is a specific sound in the earth, and I'm a trumpet being sound in the earth. I mean, it's a big orchestra, still in one, but I know my position on the stage. Even though you have an orchestra, violin, and trombone, and drums, sometimes in the symphony, all the instruments get quiet and one instrument sound. It is the violin. It is the clarinet. Everybody have the little moment. We speak of Haile Selassie. We talking about Haile Selassie. We talk about Haile Selassie. That's a very rare thing to express on this level. That we do. The true Almighty God, that must stand for something. Or else we wouldn't even be still doing this up to now. It's 2 decades we talking about Haile Selassie non-stop, non-stop to the if I don't teach it somebody, nobody is going to teach it. So I got to teach it too. That's all of this is a part. Woman, the woman in Isaiah. In fact, yeah, bring in the 7. Because when she go to the man now and the man say, well, I already have a wife. That's not a problem, my Lord. That's not a problem. I am here to advance your family. That's them levels of talking she coming with. Read Isaiah properly. That's the same energy. It's an energy. And she come to give everything. She ain't got nothing to hold back. It's everything she give. And that is why I took the time to explain nobody be doing them job there just for fun. She has to have somebody that she's supporting, even more than herself. And look at the kind of change she make in a night. She could go and feed the poor. And she bring it and wash the man's foot with it. And anoint him and kiss his feet. His feet. And you know the man no wear no shoes. His feet. Now in the book of Mark now. Wow. Mark have this thing on a slightly different level. Because in Mark, well, it doesn't highlight her that much, who she is, and all the kissing up and all of that. No, she just threw the oil on his head and anoint his head. So like he gets an anointing there. Mark now says that there was murmuring amongst the brethren. Like, what going on here? Oh, she just comment, who she? Well, they knew who she was. You could imagine some of them in the room would have already patronized her services. Yeah. Maybe regular patrons too. So it seemed like they were interfering with her, like, hey, wait a minute. And again, it says that they understood the value of what she was, throwing on him. And he was the one that had to tell them, hey, let her be, leave her alone. Because remember, he was talking to the Pharisee in Luke. So there's a lot of things was going there. He told the Pharisee, hey, listen, if somebody have plenty sins and somebody have a little sin, or somebody have 500 pounds or 500 pence and somebody have 50 pence, and they owe it to a person, and the person forgive both of them, who is going to feel it the most? The one that had the most debt, which is the woman. She had the most debt. Her sin was heavy and heavy. And she came and after taking away the sins, she came and expressed the love. But now in Mark now, they telling a man, that's a lot of money there you spending on this man here, man. You throwing away all the oil on his feet there. Yo, hey, come the man, at least save half and give it to us. We're his treasurer. Look my identity card here. I'm his treasurer. Just give me. And we can feed plenty people. We can start a foundation in your name. What you doing here? And she said, no, it's all right. And she go back and she said, yo, you woman, you're crazy. And then he had to come in and say, hey, leave her alone. What she's doing here is way, way beyond what you know is taking place. You know what he tell them? Yes, it is good that you want to feed the poor. Remember, he come to feed the poor. And you are correct. If we sell this, enough people will be fed. Because that's their job, is feeders of the poor, is the poor man government. Hear this, no man. Hear this. Rastafari. Big man tell them, the poor you have with you always. But the Son of Man is with you for a moment, expressing to all those who were in his presence how important he was, to show you, the man. Remember, the work is to feed the poor. The humble be fed, naked, clothed, sick, nourished. The work is the poor is to be fed. That's top of the agenda. And we're doing the mathematics because the treasurers were correct with their maths. We're doing the mathematics, man. If we could sell that, how many people can eat a food? That was the truth. But he's expressing now of how valuable he is. He is expressing his value. That's what that is, you know. He's trying to show you how important he is. It's just like any battlefield activity. When you take down the general, you could consider the war over. It could be 1,000 people, 10,000, 100,000 people on the battlefield. Once you get the general, you could consider that you have won the war. That's to show you that, yeah, we're all equal, we're all the same. I know we like them dead philosophy because we do not like leadership. We're such a scared set of Negroes, brother. So now we're all the same. Afraid leadership, afraid. Because you know why? We're sinners. We just want to do what we want. Yeah. So the general now, he see himself. This is how he see himself. He's seeing himself so important that although your maths is correct, although plenty people who dying of hunger now can get something to eat and live the next day, I'm more important than all of them put together. Is I make them. I can feed them in the midst of the night and you don't have to see. The poor you have with you always. But me, just for a moment. That's deep. And she understood that. So even those that were around him didn't even understand how powerful he was and exactly who he was, even though some of them testified. Because people talk with their mouth, you know, but it's the action that proves it. The action, what you do, especially when it comes to your possession. Remember again, she had all that she had and brought it to him. And it was a lot. And again, I could imagine what sin she had to do to get it. And she could have utilized it for something else. But because she understood the value of him, that was nothing for her to do. Because she was like the woman in Isaiah that went to the Messiah that says, yeah, I don't need your clothes. I would clothe myself. I would feed myself. And I would house myself. And I would do the same for you. I just need to be called by your name. And before we seal it up, let me be clear. This is not just male, female, you know. My lessons go across the board. Whether you're a man, a woman, or what. Your heart is supposed to be just like that towards the Messiah and all that the Messiah stands for and all that stands for the Messiah. Even at this moment, even at this time, it is not a joke. That's a special moment. Holy Emmanuel, I, Selassie, I, Jah, Rastafari.
Who is this man who holds the world in his hands? Who is this man
You're listening to Radio Anu, the international flavor, the universal spice. Blessed my family, do you have your copy of the True Biblical Land of Israel? No? Well, visit our website, priestisaacinstitute.com, and order your copy today. The True Biblical Land of Israel, originally a theological paper, proves to the reader that the land of Israel, according to the biblical geographic description, is Africa plus Arabia. Most definitely a must-read for all. And while you are at it, our other books, namely The Heavens Declare the Glory, Rastafari and the Cosmos, as well as Anu, Ancient and Modern Revisited, are definitely of interest to all. Each book goes for only $20, but when you order the three together, you get them for only $50. So visit our website, priestisaacinstitute.com, or email us today, priestisaacinstitute@gmail.com. Blessed reading. Give thanks. Blessed love family. Great news from the Priest Isaac's Institute of Holistic Knowledge. We are now enrolling new students for our ongoing international homeschool program. Yes, family, now is the time to contact us to get more information on our African heritage classes as well as our astronomy classes. Let me explain. Our classes are factually and scientifically based, plus designed and prepared for the inquisitive yet tender mind of the child. Classes are sent out daily via the email and will appear in your inbox every Monday to Thursday. Your young ones will receive over 140 classes in a 10-month period. That's an academic year. Interactive, colorful. Your children will love it, and you will be happy that you made that investment in them. But listen to this. We have a very special offer for you, family. This 10-month homeschool program usually goes for $50 per month. But for a limited time, you will pay only $30 per month. And hear this, not $3, but $200 for the full academic year if you decide to take the full year package. This is a worthy investment in your young ones. To enroll today, email us at priestisaacinstitute@gmail.com or visit the website priestisaacinstitute.com for more information. Also, feel free to ask us for a sample, a free sample of our classes. Once again, priestisaacinstitute@gmail.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Blessed.
Fannie Lou Hamer was a force to be reckoned with, enduring intractable racism, police beatings, and even forced sterilization. She never stopped working for equal voting rights for all. This is the tragic real-life story of Fannie Lou Hamer. Born on October 6, 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi, Fannie Lou was the 20th and youngest child of Lou Ella and James Townsend. Both Luella and James worked as sharecroppers their entire lives. When Fannie Lou was just 6 years old, she joined them despite having endured a bout of polio just a year earlier. Hamer was 8 years old in 1925 when she saw Joe Pullum, a local sharecropper, lynched. In an interview with Jack Odell in 1965, she said, "I remember that until this day, and I won't forget it." Poverty forced Hamer to drop out of school at the age of 12, and by the age of 13, she was picking as much as 400 pounds of cotton in a day and receiving $1 for her work. Since Hamer had learned how to read and write during her brief time in school, she also worked as a record keeper on the plantation and soon discovered just how the owners would cook the books to cheat the poor sharecroppers out of their fair wages. To offset this, Hamer began secretly tilting the scales to ensure people weren't cheated. She later recalled, "I didn't know what to do, and all I could do was rebel in the only way I could rebel." In 1944, Fannie Lou married Perry Pap Hamer, a tractor driver on a local plantation. 17 years later, in 1961, she underwent surgery to remove a small cyst in her stomach. When she woke, she discovered that she'd also been given a hysterectomy without her consent. According to PBS, this type of forced sterilization was so common at the time that it became referred to as a Mississippi appendectomy, a term coined by Hamer herself. On June 8, 1964, Hamer testified before a panel in Washington, D.C. that at the North Sunflower County Hospital, 6 out of the 10 Negro women that go to the hospital are sterilized with the tubes tied. Forced sterilizations have a dark history and an equally dark present in the United States. Indiana passed the first forced sterilization law in 1907, and while they hit their peak in the 1930s and 1940s, targeting those deemed to be criminals or unfit by the 1950s, sterilization laws started targeting welfare recipients as well. Forced sterilizations were frequently racially motivated. This became abundantly clear when Mississippi proposed a bill that would make it a felony for a parent on welfare to have more than one child. Jail time could be avoided if the parent consented to sterilization. Ultimately, sterilization was removed from that bill, but untold women like Hamer still were sterilized without their consent. On August 31, 1962, Hamer and 17 others went to the courthouse in Indianola, Mississippi to register to vote. According to PBS, most of the group was blocked from even attempting to register. Only Hamer and one other man were allowed to fill out an application and take a literacy test. At the time, literacy tests were purposefully designed to keep Black people from voting, and when Hamer was asked to explain de facto laws, she later recalled that, "I knowed as much about a facto law as a horse knows about Christmas Day." After failing the literacy test, the group was denied the right to register to vote. On the way home, their bus was stopped by police and fined $100 for being too yellow. Then the persecution got worse. The owner of the plantation where Hamer worked and lived demanded that she withdraw her application to vote.
Mr. Marlowe told me that I would have to go down and withdraw my registration or leave because they wasn't ready for that in Mississippi.
Hamer refused and was immediately thrown off the plantation where she had lived and worked for 18 years. She temporarily stayed with a friend before finding a new home, and just narrowly missed being murdered by those who were trying to suppress the Black vote.
They shot in the house 15 times, thinking that I was there.
On January 10, 1963, Hamer was finally able to pass the literacy test. According to The Nation, after her second attempt on December 4th, she told the registrar, quote, "You'll see me every 30 days till I pass." A month later, she passed. But despite now being registered to vote, she discovered that she still wasn't allowed to vote because she didn't have any poll tax receipts. In some parts of the United States, people were required to pay a tax in order to vote, a tax put in place to ensure that the poorest people, who were often people of color, didn't get a voice in the government. And they weren't subtle about this fact either. For instance, in 1939, Alabama's Tuscaloosa News published an editorial that read in part, "This newspaper believes in white supremacy, and it believes that the poll tax is one of the essentials for the preservation of white supremacy." In 1962, the United States passed the 24th Amendment, which outlawed poll taxes for federal elections. Despite this, Hamer was still denied the right to vote a year later because it wasn't really enforced until 1965. And to this day, 8 states, including Mississippi, still haven't ratified the amendment. While Pap worked to pay off their sharecropping debt at the plantation, Hamer continued working toward voter registration and desegregation. On June 9, 1963, Hamer and 9 other activists were returning on a bus from a voter registration and civic education training session in Charleston, South Carolina. The activists had tried to integrate lunch counters at the various bus stations along their way home, and their protests had enraged their bus driver. According to Fannie Lou Hamer, America's Freedom-Fighting Woman by Megan Parker Brooks, the driver began using the phone at every stop, reporting their location to Mississippi police. In Winona, Mississippi, police arrested at least 6 of the activists, even those who'd remain on the bus, and took them to jail. Hamer and her fellow activists weren't released from jail until June 12th. And in those 3 days, Hamer sustained such severe and prolonged beatings that she suffered from lifelong damage to her kidneys, eyes, and legs. In addition to beating the activists themselves, police also forced the other black people who were also imprisoned in the jail at the time to beat the activists as well. While there was later a brief trial, the police were cleared for their actions. After several failed attempts to work with the all-white pro-segregation Mississippi Democratic Party, Hamer co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and in 1964, she went to the Democratic National Convention in an attempt to get representation. As a result, she received death threats. When she reported them to the police, they told her, quote, "Don't look to us for help." On August 22, 1964, Hamer testified before the Credentials Committee at the Democratic National Convention. She started by stating her full name and home address, defiantly signaling her fearlessness to every white supremacist. According to the Washington Post, President Johnson was terrified that her testimony at the convention would break up the coalition of white Southern delegates he needed to get elected. He tried to convince her not to speak, but when she did anyway, he abruptly called a pointless live press conference so the TV broadcast would have to cut away from Hamer's testimony. It backfired, bringing more media attention to Hamer's testimony than it otherwise might have gotten, with many evening news programs giving full coverage of the speech that Johnson had interrupted.
Because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America.
As a result of pressure from President Johnson and vice presidential candidate Hubert Humphrey, the convention refused to accept Hamer as an official delegate. Instead, officials offered a farcical compromise to the MFDP. They'd be allowed 2 delegates, but they could neither sit in the Mississippi section, nor would they be able to cast votes. Oh, and neither one of those seats were allowed to go to Hamer. Why? According to Humphrey, the president has said he will not let that illiterate woman speak on the floor of the Democratic Convention. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party voted unanimously to reject the administration's compromise. In Hamer's words, quote, "We didn't come all this way for no 2 seats. They returned to Mississippi, shut out once again by a process meant to empower them." In 1964, Hamer also ran unsuccessfully for Congress. According to an interview with Jack Odell, Hamer recalled that it was harder for her to pass the literacy test in order to register to vote than it was for her to qualify to run for Congress. And despite being barred from the official ballot, the MFDP gave out freedom ballots that included candidates of all races. According to Smithsonian Magazine, after her first bid was unsuccessful, Hamer ran for office 2 more times in 1967 and 1971. Unfortunately, her 1967 run was disqualified on a technicality, and she lost to the incumbent in 1971. She did have one moment of triumph, though. In 1968, the Democratic Party began requiring equal representation for state delegations, and she finally was recognized as an official delegate for Mississippi at the National Democratic Party Convention. She used her platform to protest the ongoing war in Vietnam. Seeing that not much progress was being made on the political front, Fannie Lou Hamer turned most of her attention toward economic justice as a way to fight for racial equality. In 1969, Hamer founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative in order to provide black people with land that they could own and farm collectively. With the help of donors such as the Measure for Measure organization and Harry Belafonte, by 1970, the co-op had amassed 680 acres for cultivation. Membership for the co-op was $1 a month, and even though only 30 families could afford the dues, those who couldn't pay weren't excluded. Roughly an additional 1,500 families were also part of the Freedom Farm Cooperative in name. In 1970, the collective also started a pig bank for impoverished families. With help from the National Council of Negro Women, the collective purchased 5 male pigs and 35 female pigs, and over the next 3 years, thousands of pigs made their way to black families. Hamer especially loved the pig bank, stating that, quote, "I wouldn't take nothing for our golden pigs." Unfortunately, without institutional backing or resources, the Freedom Farm Collective only lasted a handful of years. But at its height, it was one of the largest employers in Sunflower County, Mississippi. According to the Center for Constitutional Rights, Hamer was actually partly responsible for the Voting Rights Act's passage thanks to her 1965 civil rights case, Hamer versus Campbell. Brought against the Circuit Clerk of Mississippi for restricting black people's right to register and vote, Hamer's victory in court even allowed the elections to be overturned due to their discriminatory practices. Even after the Voting Rights Act was finally passed in 1965, Fannie Lou Hamer continued to focus on equal voting rights. Despite the federal protections that the Voting Rights Act claimed to guarantee, though, white people in power continued to try to prevent black people from registering and voting. Still, she fought on. According to PBS, in 1970, Hamer organized plaintiffs for a class action lawsuit regarding school desegregation in Sunflower County. This suit resulted in the district court ordering the county to merge its segregated schools into a single public school system. Fannie Lou Hamer's health suffered during her final years. In 1976, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a radical mastectomy. She continued her civil rights work as long as she could, but as her health worsened, fundraising and public speaking became more and more difficult. Hamer died on March 14, 1977. Her life cut tragically short at the age of 59. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects, but some regretted the media circus that transpired. According to Fannie Lou Hamer, The Life of a Civil Rights Icon by Ernest N. Bracey, some of her fellow activists believed that dignitaries looking for a photo op ended up overshadowing coverage of Hamer's life and work, and the mourning being done by her real friends, family, and neighbors. Hamer was buried at the Freedom Farm Cooperative, and her gravestone bears her famous motto,
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.
Thank you very much, Martha Smith. I don't know whether I'll have to holler or not because I'm just used to talking loud. So I don't have too much trouble having to carry my voice. But with this kind of introduction, Martha Smith is a very good friend of mine. I remember going on educational television with Martha about 2 years ago here at the university in Wisconsin. And honest to God, this woman tickled me to death. You know, I had all kinds of trouble. But she just brought all of that out, and for a while I could relax just doing this show with Martha Smith. I would like to say this is a beautiful audience out here to me this afternoon because I always like people. A couple of weeks ago I was doing a show in New York City for NBC in the role of a black woman, and somebody asked the question during the time we was on this panel, how did I feel talking to a lot of people? I said, I feel like I always feel because I know out there in front of me is just some little folks. You know, so you don't have to worry about other people. No, you get up and tell them the truth. Now, you might be expecting me to have a long essay written down that I would have to use my glasses every 5 minutes and miss where I left it. But I don't carry around a manuscript because it's too much trouble. I'm just up here to rap and to tell you what it is and to tell it like it is. As Martha said, I was born 53 years ago in Montgomery County. Now, Mississippi, you heard about this cluster the other week, but it was already a disaster area before the cluster. And it's been a disaster area 53 years. I know, and people older than me said it was a disaster area before then. I was born 53 years ago to Mr. and Mrs. Jim Townsend. And I am the 20th child. And so help me God, I respect my mother so much that they didn't have them birth control pills. Because if they had had them, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. So as I made that narrow escape to be here, I fight for the other kids too to give them a chance. Because if you give them a chance, they might come up being Fannie Lou Hamer and something else. But during the time I was a child, my education was very limited because I had to start work when I was 6 years old. I remember one day I was playing beside a gravel road, and the landowner asked me could I pick cotton. And I told him I didn't know. And he told me he wanted me to go to the field that week and pick 30 pounds of cotton. I went to the field and I did pick 30 pounds of cotton. But the next week I was carrying 60 pounds of cotton. And by the time I was 13 years old, I was picking 200 and 300 pounds of cotton. My family was some of the poorest people that was in the state of Mississippi, and we were sharecroppers. Now, sharecropping is really something that's out of sight, folks. Number one, what I found since I've been old enough, it always had too many "it" in it. Number one, you had to plow it. Number two, you had to break it up. Number three, you had to chop it. Number four, you had to pick it. And the last, number five, the landowner took it. So this left us with nowhere to go. It left us hungry because my family would make 60 and 70 bales of cotton, and we would pick all of the cotton. And then, after we would finish picking the cotton, we would sometimes come out in debt. We never had so many days in my life that we had cornbread and we had milk and sometimes bread and onions. So I know what the pain of hunger is about. My father and mother finally got enough money out of one crop to buy some livestock when I was about 13 years old. And a man went to our lot one night, and he wasn't black, and he came about a gallon of Paris green and stirred it up in our livestock food and killed everything we had. At that point, my parents had bought 3 mules and 2 cows. Ella, Bird, and Henry was the mules, and Maud and Della was the 2 cows. And they killed everything that we had. I used to watch my mother when she would come out of the field, and she would have a big bundle of things by her side, and she would mend our clothes over and over. And I watched her when she would wear things that were so heavy after she had mended them time after time. Looked like she would have trouble carrying. At first, I couldn't understand why this just always happened to black people. So I asked my mother one day, how come we wasn't white? The reason I asked her that, because we worked all the time. The white folks never worked, and they had everything. Now this was really curious to me, as it still is. So my mother told me, number one, she wanted me to remember to respect myself as a black child. And she said, maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about now, but one day, if you respect yourself, other people will have to respect you. My grandmother was a slave, Liza Gober Bramlett. She had 20 boys and 3 girls. And I know what had happened to us in the past. But after I become about 13 years old and find out how mean that people could be to people, I said that I was going to do something about what was happening in Mississippi. So that's the reason I become involved in politics in 1964. But it had been other things in my life that I had done that some of the white people don't know that I've done yet. Because number one, I always had to work at their house. So they would tell me that I couldn't eat with them, or I couldn't bath in their tub. So what I would do was eat before they would eat and bath when they were gone. I used to have a real ball knowing they didn't want me in that tub and just relaxing in that bubble bath. And then I would fill up with everything they put on them and walk out, and they couldn't spell mine because they had the same thing on them. So when they were saying that I couldn't eat with them, it would tickle me because I would say to myself, baby, I eat first. And one of the other things I done when I was a kid, and after I got to be a grown woman, you know, we had to wash, you know how we would have to carry clothes on to wash for the white people. And if they had a dance in 50 miles, I wore the best dress. Because I wore them clothes. You know, we had, you know, I was rebelling in the only way that I could rebel. So what I'm saying to you, white America, please don't say what black people can't do, because some of the things we've been already doing. The sad thing that has been in the whole country is what white America done to us and how we can forgive. When I think about the question that comes up so often about how 6 million Jews was destroyed under Hitler's administration. I felt the kinship because it wasn't 6 million of my people destroyed. It was 40 million of my people destroyed as they was bringing my ancestors here on the slave ships of Africa. When I think about the crime that's been committed against us as human beings and as people, I can forgive easily for a lot of things. But when white America taken my name, that was a crime. I went some time ago to Charleston, South Carolina, and I looked at the documents there. And some of the documents there would call the name of a person and said, she doesn't have any education, but she's a good breeder, $25. I saw where my people had been sold as things and not human beings. And I think about some of our past history. When you never taught us, white America, that it was a black doctor that learned to save blood plasma to give a blood transfusion. You never taught that in the institution. And you never taught us that the first man to die in a revolution was Christopher Atkins, another black man. And so many other things that I've found out. And so many things that I've found out about the church. If you really want to see some hypocrites, if you really want to dig some hypocrites, go to 11 o'clock church service throughout the country. Not only in the black churches, but in the white churches. While they will tell us and tell you it's scared, well, those people are all right, but just don't bring them home with them. But the contribution that we have made in the past, and we know as well as you know, that this country was built on the blood and the sweat of black people. And all we are saying to you today, now what you have done in the past, you've done that. But we can't let you get away with just trying to wipe us out as human beings. And some of the black folks have got so confused, they talking about setting up 7 states with us, which I refuse to let them do. Setting up 7 states with us, and one night the White Citizens Council and the Ku Klux Klan and the verses which you have here could wipe us out. And I'm not going in 7 states by ourselves. We plan to be in this country with you, whether you want us here or not, and we plan to make this a better place for all the citizens, both black, red, white, and brown, and we want you to I've never been hung up in all of my work in just fighting for the black. I've never been hung up in that because I know that a lot of black people have given their lives. But I also know it was people like Andy Goodman, Michael Swerner, and James Chaney that gave their lives in the state of Mississippi, that all of us would have a better chance. And me, but they died for you, because your freedom is shackled and chained to mine. And until I am free, you are not free either. And if you think you are free, you drive down through Mississippi with your Wisconsin license plate, and you will see what I'm talking about. These are the kind of changes that we have to have. And these are the kind of changes we are going about. In 1964, when we went to the Democratic Convention in Atlantic City and challenged the seating of the representatives of the delegation from Mississippi, when they turned us down and told us to accept 2 votes at large, I told them at that time, 68 people was there in that delegation, and all of us were tired. In 1968, we came back to Chicago and we won our seat. 64, I was in the convention, out of the convention, wishing I could go in. In 1968, I was in there wishing I could get out. When I was there, jingle bells, machine gun shells, convention all the way. Because I had never in my life seen in the land of the free and the home of the brave, which we have translated in Mississippi as the land of the tree and the home of the grave. I have never seen a convention that had to be held with fixed bayonets with rifles. That means they would stick you if you stand there and shoot you if you run. I was in that convention and I made some of them guys, they had trailing me, I made them out visible. I don't know what he's, FBI, a Central Intelligence Agent, or what the hell he was, but he was there. Seeing what happened all my life, I've been behind white people and I watched. See, that's why you made your mistake, white America. You put us behind you and we watch. Now we know you and you don't know us. So I watched this guy while he'd be watching me. And whenever I got ready to dodge him, I'd put this dodge to him. And they must have told him, you better not let her get out of your sight. Because this little man had some of the scariest little blue eyes, and he'd be ducking through that convention, I'd be standing on land. And after I would just let him go through total hell, I would step out where I could see, and you could just see him just release all of it. You would have had to be in that convention to know what we are faced with today. When we say with the people, for the people, and by the people, that's a lie. It's with a handful, for a handful, by a handful. Because I know sometime when some of the votes would come up, and they said all in favor of so-and-so happening, say aye. 10 people would say aye. That the contrarians said nay. 500,000 said no. They said, I've had it and so is carried. Some convention. But we hadn't given up, because with the young people of today, we are going to make democracy a reality for all of the people. And I don't want you telling me to go back to Africa unless you're going back where you come from. I got a note one day telling me to go back to Africa. And ever since that time, it's been 3 times a week I said, when I'm in a white audience, I said, we'll make a deal. After you send all the Koreans back to Korea, the Chinese back to Chinese, the Jewish people back to Jerusalem, the Koreans back to Korea, and you give the Indians their land back, and you get on the Mayflower from whence you come, and home. Right? You don't agree, but as we all here on borrowed land, then we have to figure out how we gonna make things right for all the people of this country. And we know what has happened in the past with food stamps, welfare, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's not only in the South, it's up South and down South, where our people have suffered from malnutrition. One of my daughters stayed in the hospital 6 weeks, suffering from malnutrition. And I remember other things with other people where kids literally starved almost to death. And then I started traveling throughout this country, trying to do something about the problem. So I would come to Madison, Wisconsin, New York City, California, and all over the country, trying to raise funds to purchase food stamps. But the real crime, I think it's a crime, that if a man and woman is hungry, that they have to pay for the food stamps when thousands of people in the state of Mississippi have made less than $500 in 1970. So one day a man called and said he had some land. He had 40 acres of land and he wanted to sell the 40 acres. So I called a very small organization here in Madison, Wisconsin called Measure for Measure. Martha Smith is a part of that organization. Jeff Goldstein, Sarah Broccoli, and it's a small organization. But I called them and told them about the 40 acres of land. And if we could get the 40 acres of land to grow our own vegetables, and to grow our cattle, and to grow our pork, we could wipe out hunger in Sunflower County. I called another friend of mine who was at Harvard University in charge of the political science there, and he also started raising money too. We finally succeeded in getting 40 acres of land. And this land is all organized and founded in '69. It's called Freedom Farms Cooperative. Last summer we fed a lot of people there. But then we needed more land. So it was a man told me one day that he would sell 640 acres of land. And you know, it was just like I've been hearing in the past that, oh, it ain't nothing to that. We might get $2 or $3, but we'll have to try. Last April, we were able to put $20,000 and you know, it was just like I've been hearing in the past that, oh, it ain't nothing to that. We might get $2 or $3, but we'll have to try. Last April, we were able to put $20,000 as an option on the 640 acres of land. Then on the 14th of January 1971, we finished the down payment of $65,500 on 640 acres of land. And we had enough from that same march out of Madison, Buffalo, and Milwaukee to do that. And we also have about 58 people that's living in decent homes. We put the down payment on that land. So now what we plan to do is to grow our own vegetables, is to grow our own cattle, and to grow our own pork, the political power unless we have some kind of economic power. And all the qualifications that you have to become a part of the co-op is you have to be poor. This is the first kind of program that has ever been sponsored in this country in letting local people do their thing themselves. Because I've seen government-funded programs with cooperatives, and after you get through making the proposal with a stack of paper this high, and after you finish paying all the administration from $25,000 to $12,000, it'd be exactly $2 to go to the program. The only person that's paid at this point is the secretary. And you don't tell me that you can't change a man's mind by not hating. We have gone through all kinds of pressure. But I refuse to hate a man because he hates me. Because if I hate you because you hate me, it's no different. Both of us are miserable. And we're going to finally have something hated. But as a result of what I can give of myself, that I can love you if you hate me, we have poor whites that's coming into this organization, and we are going to feed not only the black people of Sunflower County, but all the people that's hungry regardless of color. And the young people are the people that made this possible for us. You know, I just about fell out with all of the people my age. I'm 53. And most of them my age are hopeless cases. But I am 53, but I think 19. The young people, and they talking about how old people can't relate to them. I said, you're not kidding. I don't understand what's wrong with those people. I'm not going backwards. Every step I'm going forward. And it's been a sad thing that happened in Mississippi recently. We had a twister that hit several counties in the state of Mississippi. The Red Cross came, and after they was there 2 days, I told them if I go to heaven and see the Red Cross sign, I would tell the administration to let me go back home. Because they were a hopeless case. People are suffering because it didn't just only kill people, but it's people now that want to put the trailer houses where they don't have any kind of sewage. But you got to care enough to do something. Because what you do here in Madison, Wisconsin, at this university, you're not only doing this for us in the South, but you're doing it for yourself. I've noticed what was happening with the Young World Development with the walk. The walk that will be held on the 8th and 9th of May. I see this as an opportunity of bridging the gaps between young people. Bridging the gaps because not only do I think that white children and young white men and young white women should walk, but I think it's a responsibility of the black people to walk here too. And as they walk throughout this country with 350 walks in this country and 40 other countries sponsoring the walk, there will be millions of people walking throughout the country, out the world. Because one thing I find out, that is not only hunger in the state of Mississippi, but 2/3 of the people in the world are hungry. And we have to be concerned. And you have to be concerned here, because we know with the administration that we have today, it's not too many people going to eat. But I want you to know one thing, that President Nixon wasn't no fool when he got Agnew, because that's his safety. Nobody is going to hurt President Nixon to leave us standing with Sparrow Agnew. But all of you here have to be concerned. Not only do we have to be concerned about hunger, but we also have to be concerned about peace in this country. You know, it's something strange to me when they tell me that we are over there in Vietnam fighting for the rights of people to elect their government and all of this kind of crap, with Eastern and Senate helping to make policies when we can't do it in Mississippi. And you young people are going to help make this change, because we can't continue on the same way, expanding the war in Vietnam, killing the people over there, and people being shot down in the streets throughout this country, sometimes in the name of law and order. I've been to jail, and I've been beaten in jail till my body was hard as metal. And I've been charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. And there's a lot of other young people throughout this country that has been beaten down. But I want you to know something in this audience today. A house divided against itself cannot stand. A nation divided against itself is on its way out. We are going to have to stand up and make demands that will make this country worthwhile. Because I have trouble today, and I've had trouble in the past few years. When I got out of jail and couldn't hardly sit down, and a man carried me to see the Statue of Liberty, and a woman standing with a torch and facing another problem. I told the man that I was riding with that day, I said, I would like to see this statue turned around to face her own problem, and to touch out of her hand with her head bowed, because we have as many problems in this country as they trying to furnish another country. I can't stand today not with dignity and sing the national anthem. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hated. Poor oppressed people throughout this country don't have anything to hate. And I just sing it in my own way when I have to stand and sing that song. Because you know as well as I know that America is sick and man is on the critical list. And when people can be shot down at a college like Kent and a college like Jackson State College by people that's dodging the arms, it's something very wrong. I call the National Guard draft guards. Not only have they dodged being drafted, but they was caught looting in southern Mississippi after the storm. We have to work to make this a better place. And we have to deal with politics in the history of this country that's not in the book. You know, we've been reading about what was in the book, you know, about Columbus discovered America. And when he got here, there was a black brother that worked up there and said, "Let me help you, man." And there was some Indians here too. So how could he discover what was already discovered? The education has got to be changed in these institutions. Because what many people realize with our challenge in 1965, the congressman from Mississippi, that we were able to gather 15,000 pages of evidence, and they still there. And the same kind of challenge had been done almost 100 years ago, and they succeeded. But in 1966, Adam Clayton Powell was unseated, and he hadn't done any more than any other congressman there. The only difference, he was a black man. We got to tell the truth even in these institutions, because there's one thing about it, folks. You elderly folks my age is almost hopeless. You got to know now that the children know what's going on, and you're not going to be able to fool them any longer. Before I close, I would just like to say that I believe in God. And he said he would raise up a nation that would obey him. So the young people that's out here today, that's fighting for justice for all human beings, I believe are the chosen people that's going to lead this country out if it's not too late. I have one announcement, and then I'll close. The Community Code Study of the Third World Development starts March the 18th at 7 a.m. St. Francis House. These are the young people that some of you sponsored that made it possible for us to have today 680 acres of land, are enabling us to determine some of our destiny, and is enabling us to stand up as human beings, not to try to take the state of Mississippi. Because if tonight I figured the state of Mississippi would come 100% black, I would be on my way out. But to make it a state where all human beings will have a chance. And as I close, I would like for you to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, as we have paid such a big price, ask yourself, must I be carried to the sky on flowery beds of ease while others fight to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? Thank you.
Blessed love my family. It is time to step into the tiger's nest. Join me every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Tiger's Nest.
right here on Radio Anu, the international flavor, the universal spice, hosted by the Honorable Priest Isaac. Blessed. You're listening to Radio Anu, the international flavor, the universal spice.
The subject of black history is in dispute in some quarters. A man named J.A. Rogers, who was laughed at 20, 30 years ago, not taken seriously at all, is being taken very seriously these days. A new book called Great Black Men of Color has been edited by our guest tonight, Professor John Henry Clark. Professor Clark, there are some rather startling, to put it mildly, revelations made in the book about certain presumed facts of history that I'm certain will not stick with the general white historical community.
Well, I'll tell you, it became almost necessary for the Europeans to whiten up a part of black history when they began to take over the world in the 15th and the 16th century. And what Rogers has done is going back and taken a whole lot of the white away and showed you the original black faces of certain people in history. In this two-volume work, World's Great Men of Color, Volume 1 is devoted to the Old World, and Volume 2 is devoted to the New World. The first thing he does is to put Egypt in proper context and to show Egypt and the great personalities of ancient Egypt as black people. And it might be startling, but he reveals that Cleopatra did not look like Elizabeth Taylor and wasn't a white woman at all. And I think his book starts in Egypt with the other great characters in Egypt, Imhotep, the real father of medicine, father of architecture, builder of the step pyramids, forerunner of astronomer, a man who was accepted as a god in Europe long before the birth of Christ. Imhotep lived about 5,000 years ago. And early Europe accepted quite a few Africans as deities. Imhotep was one of them. He opens the book actually with this great African who was the world's first multi-genius.
You said that Rogers put Egypt in its proper perspective. What did you mean by that?
I mean, if European historians acknowledge that ancient Egypt was a black nation, then they would have thrown all Western history out of kilter, because Western historiography is based on the mistaken concept that if Egypt wasn't European, it was at least Oriental. It was neither. Because Rogers traced, as many competent historians, black and white, have already done, the southern origins of Egypt, and that the people, who would later be called Egyptians, came from deep within Africa, maybe Ethiopia and Somaliland. And they kept good relationships, good and bad, like all families, with the people to the south all of this time. And the proof is positive. And do not think that Rogers is out on a black thing, or that most black historians are out on a solely black thing. Most of us got our most radical information from white writers that other white historians do not read, such as Gerald Massey and his 6-volume classic work called Egypt, Light of the World, which proved positively that ancient Egyptians were black. Count Vorez in his Ruins of Empires, Gustav Hearns in a 6-volume work, Researches in the Ancient History, the early work of the American Egyptologist Breasted, Sir Wallace Budge. And so we are going to radical historians, especially Massey and his Natural Genesis and the Book of the Beginning, establish behind them the black perspectives in history. And if white historians accept the black perspectives in history, they would have to admit that the white perspectives in history is wrong. And I'm afraid they're not quite equal to that right now.
Well, what is the, if there is a black perspective in history, there is a white perspective in history.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, I'm assuming, that history is being manipulated for an end.
In itself.
In itself.
History, the Europeans began to manipulate history when they rose and began to expand into the broader world in the 15th and the 16th century, because they had to justify the slave trade and they had to justify the colonial system that followed. And modern racism has its incubation in that period. You cannot enslave a man and say he's a human being, that he has humanity, he has and that he was one of the forerunners of the world's religion. You cannot enslave an African and say this about him, because if you say he's a human being, then you're saying he's an extension of you. Then you cannot sell an African Christianity and call him a heathen and acknowledge the African contribution toward the creation of Christianity. So it's a contradiction in acknowledging that the man created Christianity, then come back and say that you are selling him Christianity because he is a heathen. So the European had to literally strip history of the contributions of non-European people. To a certain extent, they did this in Asia. Now, what Rogers has done in these two books is to go back and set history in some kind of perspectives based on this information. And all of the information did not come from black historians. It came from the best records available from all of them.
Now, speaking of information, Rogers has alleged some very startling things, and we're using that word because I think in the context of having had only white history, anything black is startling, and so I'm saying it in a positive way. That some of his information has said that there were a number of American presidents who actually were black, that there were a number of prominent Americans that history has treated as whites, who by his criterion or criteria of who was black and white, according to society's definition, were black.
Oh, no, not according to Rogers' definition now. Understand, and this is the irony of it all, and this is the trap. Black people have never written any definitions of race, any definitions of what a people mean, has been. I mean, they have never said that these people with these kind of traits belong here, because modern racism had its development in the pseudo-scientific development of intellectual Europe after the 15th century, and they began to say that certain kind of people belong to certain kind of race, and they created the concept of race and racism itself. Now, according to the laws that's still on the statute book of the United States and some other parts of the world, one drop of us makes you a whole. Now, this ridiculous law and stipulation and measurement has given black people a lot of white people according to that law. Now, it has given us Beethoven, who was called a dark Moor. Now, he was probably one of the many olive-complected Europeans that you see in the millions throughout Europe. But in the States, in the United States, they say that if you have one drop of blood of a black person, you're a whole black person. Now, by this stupid law, we have a whole lot of white people. There's a whole lot of people that think they're white that belong to us. We might claim all of South America because the Spaniards were mulattoes when they got there, having been mixed with the Moors for nearly 800 years, and they were even before the Moorish conquest. Mediterranean Europe was highly mixed with Africans. Nobody thought anything of it because they were a mixture of power and influence and trade, and And they got along fairly well together for hundreds of years before they turned on each other. And I don't say it did the Europeans any harm, because the handsomest people in Europe are the olive-complected people who mix with the Africans.
You're saying, in essence, that there's no such thing as a race.
Oh, I maintain that race is the phoniest issue ever invented by the mind of man. The European invented and developed the concept of race. There's really no such thing as a race, because nature created no races. The whole race is a man-made thing, you know.
Well, how did people get to be French and English?
Well, different climatic conditions and migrations and amalgams of different people, and migrations of people into your country, migrations of people out. All right. Now, this is an ethnic grouping as against what we call race. If you go back and you look at an old dictionary, you won't even find a definition for a race. Race grew out of the pseudo-scientific development of Europe. And this is what Rogers was addressing himself to, and saying that according to your rule, which is ridiculous, a lot of you belong to us.
Well, in another context, if race is arbitrary, then could we say that being called black was a political term?
It's a political term, and a term which indicates our self-awareness at this juncture in history, and I think we really need it. We need to really bathe in blackness for a while, but I wish we'd get the bath over with and go on to something a little more important, because black in itself is not an ethnic term. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. We are essentially an African people. Wherever we live on this earth, we're essentially an African people. And we relate to the millions of African people throughout the world, including the uncounted millions of Africans in Asia. The word Afro-American or African-American would probably be more appropriate and more honest and more in keeping with what we actually are, because all of us are not positively, physically, real jet black. And so the argument now sometimes is between the supernationalists and the mild nationalists and blacker than thou, when blackness is a state of mind, a state of attitude, a state of approach to things that can exist in almost any of us, including from the blonde black person to the jet black. And the jet black can be traitors, and they can be patriarchs, they can be a whole lot of... See, we've been everything in history from saint to buffoons. We're a complete people, and we need to start looking at ourselves as a complete people. And I think that once we convinced ourselves that we're black and beautiful, we'll stop saying it and just go ahead and be black and beautiful and release a whole lot of energy for more important things.
All right, since you said that J.A. Rogers was a chronicler that related events, what is there in these two volumes in terms of facts that would be beneficial to black Americans in the regaining of our lost heritage?
In terms of facts, is that J.A. Rogers goes through history and places in proper perspectives with documents the role of the black personality in history, beginning from the origin of man in Africa to the present time. And I'm saying that black people need a measurement of the role that they have played in history. And Rogers was the pioneer in the search for the black personality in history and his role. And this is important because through Rogers, in his first volume on the Old World, you can see what the Africans achieved, and what the Africans not only achieved within Africa, but the conflicts among African and how these conflicts were settled. Egypt was invaded from within Africa, which began the decline. That was the Kushite invasion, led by that magnificent trio of black generals, Castor, Pianki, and Taharqa. And the interesting thing about these men, especially Taharqa, the last of the trio, is that he not only controlled what is Kush, was part of Ethiopia and the Sudan of today and Egypt, but he invaded Libya and practically all of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran, all in those areas. And in those areas, he found both friends and foes. Now, if he found friends and enemies, if he found people in the Middle East willing to fight with him, he a black general. This tells you that color wasn't such a major factor, but the power, the rise and fall of power. Rogers tells us some other interesting things in Volume 1. Actually, I wish we had time just to deal with Volume 1 alone, because it tells you of the early European invaders of Africa, after he finished telling you about Akhenaten and the great queens of Egypt, and that woman, the first truly great woman in history, Hatshepsut, about the black generals who served in white armies. Cletus Nigra, who was one of the commanding generals in the army of Alexander. And he deals with the romance around Alexander, which shocked the hell out of some people, because Alexander not only did not die worrying about no worlds to conquer, he died in a drunken stupor, and all this is documented. He threw a dagger at Cletus Nigra, the black general, who differed with him in front of his high command, and he died in self-reproach after this act, not worrying about no more worlds to conquer. It's another thing. And another aspect of Alexander, which I call the so-called great, that we need to take into consideration is Alexander was a magnificent diplomat, probably one of the most brilliant diplomats ever. He really wasn't much of a warrior. In fact, one of the main reasons why Cletus Nigra could kid him, because he had saved his life on the battlefield a number of times. And Alexander, after he got into Asia Minor, was ridiculing Greek soldiers. And Cletus Nigra, the black general, told him, you wasn't, as for Greek soldiers, you really, in effect, not so hard yourself. And he reminded him of the time that he saved his life. And Alexander was a little bit embarrassed and insulted by having this mention in front of his high command. And he was drinking too much at the time anyway. Now, that takes a whole lot of romance out of history to treat Alexander that way, but it's documented truth.
Well, what are some of the statements, facts, allegations that Rogers makes specifically about who prominent white Americans were, who he now says were black?
Well, he said that 5 of our presidents were black, and considering the fact that the ones that were black seemed to be about the poorest presidents we had, I'd rather not bother about getting into names, but advise you to read the small book by J.A. Rogers called Our 5 Negro Presidents and argue with someone else. But
are there any of the families of these presidents alive who acknowledge that one of their ancestors who was a president was black?
I'll name one, which because there's been so much writing about it and so much proof, and because some of the families are still alive, and someone want to run this down. President Harding had black blood, had some of what we call Negro blood.
Mm-hmm. Where is this documented?
There were several articles on it. Alan Morrison, the late Alan Morrison, used to be New York editor of Ebony, did an article on it in the first Negro Digest years ago. But I'll tell you another one, which where the documents are a little clearer. That's Alexander Hamilton. He wasn't a president, but he was very prominent. Sure. Alexander Hamilton, whose mother was a black woman from the West Indies.
Are there any other prominent Americans that you can think of that are named in, this would be the second volume?
Mm-hmm. That would be the second volume in which he names permanent Americans who obviously had what we refer to as Negro blood. Mm-hmm. Robert Browning, the Englishman, and he documents that too, who had laid court to Elizabeth Barrett. And
I think Alexander Dumas was one of the people he named.
Oh, Alexander Dumas. There's no question about Alexander Dumas. He was a brown-skinned man with a bush. I mean, we don't argue about the Dumas, but there were 3 Dumases. Understand that. Not just Alexander Dumas. We talk about grandpapa, father, and son. Now, one Alexander Dumas, black general, West Indian descent, was second in command to Napoleon. In fact, he was Napoleon's artillery commander in the Egyptian campaign. And when the French were voting for someone to take over the French army, Napoleon won by 1 vote. In other words, the French were liberal enough at that time to accept a black man as commander-in-chief of their armies. I'm sorry they didn't elect Alexander Dumas. It would have saved them a lot. And a whole lot of things Napoleon did was useless and nothing but the washing of French ego and costing a whole lot of French money. The one thing I don't think Alexander Dumas would have done is to go into that ice box called Russia in the dead winter time. He wouldn't have played no fool like that. Now, the other 2 Alexander Dumas you need to separate because most people merge them. Now, the father of French adventure literature, the Three Musketeers and the like, that's one Alexander Dumas. Now, the author of Camille and the romantic tradition in French literature, that's his son. Now, although father and son did not get along, but they stem from the same cloth. So there was actually 3 Alexander Dumases. One was a military man, served under Napoleon, who lost command of the French army to Napoleon by 1 vote. The other one who began the adventure literature, and the other one who began the romantic literature. And he was somewhat of a prince of Paris, a devil with the ladies, but there's no argument about these people.
Well, how do you suspect that these statements and beliefs are going to be accepted by white America and by the white historical community?
Well, they're not going to accept them readily, but if they read the documents, there's not much of an argument.
Well, they can always show you their documents, can't they?
Well, they can show me their documents, but one cannot outbalance the other. I mean, I've seen, there's a whole lot of things that white historians say that has nothing to do with documents at all. They just open their mouth and say it. Like Christopher Columbus discovered America. Now, he's discovered people here. He discovered a whole lot of people already in America. So he discovered America. Okay. Now, and they just arbitrarily say that the Europeans brought naturalist civilization. And actually, the Europeans destroyed more civilization than they brought. And I can go to white documents and prove this. I don't have to go to my documents. According to their documents, I can prove that they destroyed more people and more civilization than they built. All right. Another thing which Rogers brings up in another one of his books called Africa's Gift to America is the pre-Columbian presence of Africans in the so-called New World. That Africans were here not only before Columbus, but according to Professor Wiener in a 3-volume work called Africa and the Discovery of America, he may have been here before the Indians. Now, the original documentation on this came from white historians. And so many times when a white historian is arguing with a black historian, the one thing he will probably have to do is to go back and argue with the white historian from which the black historian got the original base information, and he extended that research further than the white historian. Now, the white historian is in a bad fix right now because he's hung up with a lie, and because he used to open his mouth and say something and people believe it without question, and now they are questioning it. I can snow him under with documents, and mostly documents written by other white people repudiating him. So I'm not worried about the document war. I know I can win that one.
Professor Clark, how do you distinguish between the words Negro and black?
I don't distinguish. I mean, I distinguish between the word. The way I held the word Negro is by dismissing it. And I dismiss it because there's no such thing as a Negro, because there's no Negro people and no Negro land. This is an adjective that somebody made a noun out of and slapped on a people against their will. And I dismiss the word Negro. The word black can relate to a whole lot of people, and it can become confusing. You see, people must relate to land, history, and culture. And this is what limits the word black. Because if you say black, and where is the black land? I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. If you say English, an image comes before your eyes, good or bad. The changing of the guards, Buckingham Palace, Stouthearted, the Bengal Lancers, If you say French, good cooking, great lovers, Napoleon, all that. All immediately you got an image. But you say Negro, what comes before you? No images, really. A condition. And a people is not a condition. A people must have a name that relates them to land, history, and culture. And so therefore, the name of a people, if it's going to be authentic, cannot be black. That can refer to how the people look. The name of the people have to relate to the land of origin. Now, no one is having any difficulty saying Italian American, Greek American, French American. And I don't think they should have any difficulty saying African American or Afro American, as the case may be. Now, these are people who are black in the main. But let's get something straight. All Africans are not black. Black is the prevailing color in Africa. There are Africans who have not been mixed with any white people at all, who are light brown. And they've always been that way. And they're just as African as the blackest of the Africans. So if we got hung up on a narrow definition like black without explaining that it has elasticity that extends beyond a person being jet black, then we get ourselves into another trap. We get out of one trap and get into two. So now let's qualify what we're talking about when we're black. But when we're speaking of a people on a world basis, then let's relate them to land, history, and culture, so we'll know what we're talking about. Until someone creates a nation called black, from which we emulate, black land, black area, black borough, then I'm afraid that the word black is rather limited.
Right. I'd like to thank you very much. You've certainly said quite a few things. The book, The World's Great Men of Color, is undoubtedly going to cause quite a stir and be of amazing educational value. Thank you very much, Professor Clark.
Thank you.
Blessed Love family, great news from the Priest Isaac's Institute of Holistic Knowledge. We are now enrolling new students for our ongoing international homeschool program. Yes, family, now is the time to contact us to get more information on our African heritage classes as well as our astronomy classes. Let me explain. Our classes are factually and scientifically based, plus designed and prepared for the inquisitive yet tender mind of the child. Classes are sent out daily via the email and will appear in your inbox every Monday to Thursday. Your young ones will receive over 140 classes in a 10-month period. That's an academic year. Interactive, colorful. Your children will love it, and you will be happy that you made that investment in them. But listen to this. We have a very special offer for you, family. This 10-month homeschool program usually goes for $50 per month. But for a limited time, you will pay only $30 per month. And hear this, not $300, but $200 for the full academic year if you decide to take the full year package. This is a worthy investment in your young ones. To enroll today, email us at priestisaacinstitute@gmail.com or visit the website priestisaacinstitute.com for more information. Also, feel free to ask us for a sample, a free sample of our classes. Once again, priestisaacinstitute@gmail.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Blessed love.
did not suffer and die to give me an education to slight, oppress, or discourage my people. Because whatsoever education I acquired out of their sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no more life for you. I unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, hewers of wood and drawers of water. Well, I predicated my view of man on the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now, from this premise followed the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men that dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own race, because if Negroes are created in God's image and Negroes are black, then God must in some sense be black. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. We have found a new ideal. Because whilst our God has no color, and yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles, and since the white people have seen their God through their white spectacles, we have only now started to see our God through our own spectacles. But we believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God of Father, God of Son, God of Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. For 250 years, we have struggled under the burden and rigors of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cry is raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. Do you think it unreasonable that we, the blacks of the world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? The Negro is the man. We represent the new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. Where the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use, they have not the resources to develop nor the intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to abuse God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race. Possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on her feet, but on her brains. You can enslave us, was done for 300 years, the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men, you can shackle the feet of men, you can imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Dive down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull our nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when you have wrought well, you will have merited God's blessing, you will have become God's chosen people, and naturally you will become leaders of the world. And as you bow down to the white man today, so a lot of races bow down to you and call you a race of master because of the superiority of your mind and your achievement. Because no race has the last word in culture and civilization. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know what we are thinking. They are thinking in terms of dreadnoughts, battleships, aeroplanes, submarines. You know what we are thinking about? That is our own private business. So give us credit for being able to use our minds. And with people becoming conscious of themselves, determined to use their minds, you do not know to what extent they can go. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. We love the white race, not for social fellowship, but for the common brotherhood of God intended we should live. What satisfaction can anyone get in being happy and see his brother wallowing in filth, dirt, and disease? How can you be happy living in luxury and your brother's living in disease? And then when you try to help the one out of the disease, the subtle culprit talks about disloyalty. Black men of Carthage, black men of Ethiopia, of Timbuktu, of Alexandria gave the light of civilization to this world. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt. Because classes, nations, races have been quite quiet for over 4 centuries. Who was merely born of youth, insult, humiliation, whose forbearance can only be compared to the prophet Job, as likewise lifted his bowed head and raised it up to God's skies and cried out, I am a man, and demand a man's chance and a man's treatment in this world. But I shall teach the black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he's not. Whoa. In the days of slavery, race mixture, miscegenation had occurred because the African woman had no protection from the slave master. Therefore, there is no need today for black people to themselves freely continue a practice that smacks so much of slavery. Our parents said that the race problem will be solved through higher education, through better education, that black and white will come together, that they will never happen until Africa is redeemed. Because if those who like W.E.B. Du Bois believe that the race problem will be solved in America through higher education, they will walk between now and eternity and never see the problem solved. God made man Lord of his creation, gave him possession and ownership of the world. And you have been so darned lazy that you have allowed the other fellow to run away with the whole world, and now he's stopping you and telling you that the world belongs to him and that you have no part in it. I don't have to apologize to anybody for being black, because God Almighty knew exactly what he was doing when he made you black. If black people knew their glorious past, then they would be more inclined to respect themselves. Yes, you heard it, Johnny Walker Red. And black. Well, he had it at first, but he's still going strong. The shock of the hour. See, brothers and sisters, you are not going to straighten up on any word from me. Just the better ones of you. You're not going to hear no warning. No. Bush is not going to straighten up. Deng Xiaoping is not going to straighten up. The world leaders are bent on their course. They don't straighten up with no preaching. The shock of the hour has to be so powerful that it casts terror into the heart. Make you drop to your knees like the oxen that is being laid under burden. Force you to pray to whatever God you think you know, make you call him. And among men, disputes about Allah.
Yeah, you know, when you go to get your points back, when you go to even the score up, you can't worry about who out there with him, his mama, his daddy, his kids. It's on. It's just it's on right there on the spot.
I got another gang story to tell people about how a black brother was born in hell. And right then and there, there's no hope, cause a brother can't escape the gangs and the dope. Damn, and when it's black on black, that's a pity. Can't survive in the Compton city. And food, let's bet. Cause when you grow up in the hood, you got to claim a set. Yeah, it's not that you want to, but you have to. Don't be your mark, cause brothers might laugh you straight off they block. Can't do it busters, so they tails get clocked. Who gives a damn about another? Only got love from my gang brothers. Yeah, but I'm young, so nobody would wonder that the hood would take me under. Somebody help me.
Yeah, putting in work is like, you know, something happened to one of your homeboys, you go retaliate, handle that business, get one of them down, point score, make it even, you know what I mean?
Now I'm a few ages older. Just call me a nut, cause the 8 got bolder. And putting it work, you know I has to do my part. I'm down for the hood, and it's planted in the heart. Fool, at school, slapping on the girls' butts. But get the right education, cause yo, it's driving me nuts. Cause ain't no teaching a brother what reality. Teach me the Compton gang mentality. Pop, 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 drops the sucker. If he's from another hood, I got to shoot the sorry brother. Gee, I'm in it to win it and can't quit. Fool, and ready to die, cause I'm with it. One times can't fade the game tough. Putting my foot in your tail to make time rough. I'm the neighborhood terror, but I never wondered that the hood would take me yonder. Somebody help me, yeah.
One day, you kicking it with your homeboy, the next day he gone. You know what I'm saying? You hurt. It make you want to go do something drastic, like smoke somebody.
People die every day.
Somebody help me.
So, for me, I don't care. I'm down for my hood.
The hood done took me yonder.
Let me explain something to you in plain English.
Now I watch my back cause brothers jeffin'. Times hurt the 8, caught the 187. Who I thought was my homie dropped the dime. So I gotta peel his cap with the 9. Yeah, if it's on, then it's on. Forget it, G, because how the odds are looking, fool. It's either him or me. So I loads up the Glock and I step, cause my brain cells are dead and all I think is death, revenge. Yeah, that's what it's all about. See the brother take the sorry sucker out. Instead of fool down with the eye contact, they try to swing, so I draw him with the gap. Blast was the sound of one time's heard of. Brother 25, the life for the murder. Was it worth it? I always wonder. Maybe if Compton didn't take me yonder, somebody help me, yeah. Yeah, all my homies in the house, say the hood done took me yonder.
For centuries, the tarot cards have tumbled through history, a tantalizing blend of mystery and beauty. Packed with potent images and ancient symbols, these cards have predicted the rise and fall of kings and empires. Linked to the most ancient mystical systems, the tarot cards' origins are as mysterious as the source of their powers. How can a pack of cards probe the past and unlock the secrets of the future? And how do tarot readers use the extraordinary images on the cards to unravel our deepest, darkest concerns? The tarot is more than a set of beautiful cards. It's a system of divination, a way to reveal the unknown. Penetrating mystery and deception, it answers questions about the past and the present, and hints at what is to come. Millions of people have discovered for themselves the uncanny power of the tarot. Among them was Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, general to the Emperor Napoleon. France, January 1804. Bernadotte arrived at the house of celebrated tarot reader Mademoiselle Lenormand. He had heard of her success in using cards to foretell the future and wanted to test their power for himself. Pretending to be a businessman, Bernadotte asked Lenormand to predict the outcome of a fictitious commercial venture. As she did with all her clients, she told him to shuffle the cards and concentrate on the question he was asking. She then focused her mind and spread out the cards. The first one she turned over was the Knight of Swords. She told Bernadotte that he was no businessman, but a high-ranking military officer. The cards had seen through his disguise. You are not only of high rank, she told him, you are connected to one who will be made emperor. The third card was the King of Swords, and you yourself will one day be a great king. The last card was death. If the cards were accurate, then Napoleon would become Emperor of France. But if Bernadotte were to become king, would he have to overthrow Napoleon? Later the same year, Napoleon indeed became Emperor of France. In 1818, 3 years after Napoleon's downfall, Bernadotte was crowned king, not of France, but of Sweden. The tarot continues to enlighten those who use it. In the hands of a skilled reader like Patty McLean, the tarot can illuminate every facet of life.
The tarot is a wonderful philosophical system that can get into all the nuances of your positive and negative energies in terms of how you're conducting your life, and it can show you what you're doing wrong and where you need to give some thought to making correction in your pattern.
And as we definitely give thanks to the life-giver and keep of life. We definitely welcome you to another edition of the Mystic Vibrations Shock of the Hour. And of course, with you, the Honorable Priest Isaac, obviously just keeping a humble meditation. I must say the hood done took me on to really touch the spot, man. Sad, eh? If you were paying attention. Well, let me say once again, welcome to another edition of the Shock of the Hour, the Mystic Vibrations Shock of the Hour. This is the moment where we come together and uplift the heavens and the spirit and the thought. Very thankful that you have taken the time and chosen to be with us to keep this upful sensation. Yeah, just doing what we got to do the way that only we can do it. So we got to come and do it. Give thanks for the power of the seven with us. And let me just remind each and every subscriber to the Shock of the Hour, very key and very important that you download these programs and save them specifically to your archive. Save them to your library. That is extremely important, my good brothers and sisters. You know, for sure. I mean, we usually give like a 2 strong advance for you to download and save these programs, so you have at least 2 strong, what they call 2 weeks, you know, after every program for you to download and save the program to your archive. So we are encouraging each and every one to do such. I mean, I must say I have some people that clearly tell me that they ain't saving no program. I mean, I'm talking about subscribers up to speed, well on time with payment subscribers, straight up. And they're telling me all they need is to hear their little email thing say bing. And when they look and they see my name, they listen to the program. They wrap up an L, they wrap up the joint, they light the fire. Some say they go on the veranda. Some say they go here, there, and everywhere. But the point is that they go and make sure they sit in and they listen to the Shock of the Hour.
Maybe they may run it one more time and that's it. That's it. If you want it, whatever the case is and they can't find it again, that's okay with them. They know they sat in and they got it because it's coming every night. So I'm very thankful, at least, because they just make it plain. But for sure, for those of you who know that you don't want to go back and press the button and the program is not there, I'm advising you to download it and to keep it in your archives. The same thing with the videos and these stuff. You got to download these stuff and keep them in your archives. Specifically, as you know, all of that is a lot of space that is taken up. Yes, we can purchase more space. People ask you that too. People really come and ask you that, well, why don't you just purchase more space? I mean, I'm telling you, sometimes I have to laugh. You could imagine the amount of space that we have to purchase, really. So I think, as I said, the Mystic Vibration is a program that comes to you every evening. So obviously you got to put aside a space for that product itself. I know you obviously value it. That's why you have it. That's why you listen to it. And to be straight, that is why you pay for it. Those who pay for it, because you see the value in it, and you are extremely correct. There is high value in the shock of the hour. So I would advise that you download and save these programs. Very, very important. Yes, we began on a very interesting subject there tonight, which is the subject we are delving in tonight, talking about tarot cards. Not tarot, some people I hear people call it tarot, this tarot cards. And the mystics of them, that little short clip you heard there was speaking of the 18th, 19th century, speaking of Napoleon, speaking of his general who went to a soothsayer, a reader, basically, let me say, a reader. And the reader clearly showed him, according to the cards, that he, his general will be king, and then he will be king after his general. But he was saying, but if I was to be king after the general, that means I have to overthrow the general. You see how them they live? He not even considering, well, maybe the general, in his benevolent state say, well, brother, I think I'm getting old. How about you taking over the reins? No, he doesn't see from his perspective that he is going to have to overthrow his general to become king, if his general is going to be king, and then he's going to be king after. But according to the history, Napoleon became the king of France, ruler of France himself and all her colonies, and then he became the king of Sweden and all her colonies. Yeah. Sweden has any colonies or had, by the way? I don't really think so. I'm not too sure. Gotta check that out. But we're not talking really directly of Napoleon and his generals. We are talking about the sacred reading of these cards, the tarot cards. Now, the tarot cards, first known as Triumphi and later as Tarotchi or Tarot, is a pack of playing cards used in the mid-15th century in various parts of Europe to play games such as Italian Tarocchini, if that is pronounced correct, French Tarot, and Austrian Konigrufen, many of which are still played today. In the late 18th century, some tarot decks began to be used for divination via tarot reading cards and cartomancy, leading to custom decks develop such occult purposes. Like common playing cards, the tarot has 4 suits which vary by region. French suites or suites in Northern Europe, Latin in Southern Europe, German in Central Europe. Each has 14 cards, 10 pip cards, numbering from 1 or ace to 10, and 4 face cards, king, queen, knights, jack, knave, page. Okay, In addition, the tarot has a separate 21 card trump and a single card known as the Fool. Good. Depending on the game, the Fool may act as the top trump or may be played to avoid following suit. These tarot cards are still used throughout much of Europe to play conventional card games without, occult association. Okay, so basically, when you hear of the tarot cards, as I said, I've never had any reading. I'm telling you straight now before we go too far, I'm not speaking as an expert on the subject at all. In fact, many of you who may be listening may have much more knowledge and information as it relates to this. So I'm just telling you off the bat. But basically now, the little that I would know and know firsthand experience, and to be very frank here, not even frank, how you come to be frank? Frank? Come on, come better than that, man. To be very African here. Yeah, I have no intention of getting any tarot reading and all of these different things. But basically, and I'm going to get into another documentary I want to touch upon now. But basically, when you hear of the cards, you usually associate them with the occult and some sort of medieval European magic. And some would claim that they originated even further before, Europe and medieval Europe and before the Renaissance and all of that. As you know, most people like to link things with Egypt and the occult of Egypt. Everybody wants Egypt. Even the aliens hold on to Egypt. Anything you're doing, just try to fit Egypt into it and you're good. So there are those that will say that, this reading of the cards went back as far back as to Egypt, although, there's no strong evidence to prove that. Yes, in the ancient Kemetic period, you would always hear of the ancient science, the ancient Heka. Now people talk about what the heck. You see, heck is like a nice version of hell. But the Heka is like what you want to call spell. The real spell is the language that you talk. That's the spell. Them words, you got to spell them. You're under a spell. You better believe you're under a spell because words are swords. You take the S at the end of words and put it at the beginning, you get sword. You understand? So I'm telling you, the mystic is the language. That is the spell. The words we speak, the letters. It starts with a letter. From a letter to a word. A few letters come together with vowels and consonants, you get a word. And words come together, you get a sentence. With your period and your comma and preposition and full stops, whatever. And now the sentence now, interesting word, sentence, couple sentences put together, you get a paragraph, and you get a couple paragraph with a date and an address and all of that, and you have a letter. So it starts with a letter. It starts with a letter. A letter, like good morning, good is G, A letter, G-O-D. D, G-O-O-D, good. That's 4 letters, that's a word. And several words make a sentence. And several sentences give you a paragraph. And you get a couple paragraphs and an address and a sending address, and you have a envelope. You have just written a letter. You have written a letter and you started the letter with a letter. Whatever the first letter you wrote was, when you were done, you had a whole letter there. This is the language we speak. That's why we call it English. I hope you pick up by now because I can't stay forever on that one point. But the point is that the language itself is a spell. That's why you spell these words you make sure everything is right, make sure your spelling is right. You hear that? Read over the letter, make sure all the spelling is right. So in general, just what we're dealing with here is the occult, if you want to call it. And really, in all fairness to the word occult, it really means hidden science, really. I know when you say occult and all kind of things, it's woo. Yeah, but really, in all honesty to the world, in all respect to the world, that's what it means. So really now, in ancient times, we did have what you may call ancient magic and ancient science. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Hey, what is this at all? People can levitate and telekinesis and move things without touching them and all sorts of different things. That's just ancient high science. Nothing really spooky. It may appear spooky because we're totally outside of that realm. We're totally away from that science. In the same way that people could lie and float in water on their back. They have people that can stand in water and walk on it. It may be much difficult to do, but it can be done. They have lizards that run in water. They have insects that stand up in water. They have birds that be walking in water. I mean, so it is something that has been done, and it's just an understanding of how to use the term, you know, take advantage of or manipulate nature in a sense. Maybe not manipulate, but to take advantage of nature and know how to utilize it to create the environment for you to stand, even run in water. Even if it's to run, it might sound strange, but it's easier to run in water than to walk in water. You understand? Obviously, this is something that, you know, takes a lot of practice, meditation, spirit, a real dedication to get there, but I'm positive you can get there. It can be gotten, you know. Not to say that there's not strong allegory in a lot of the religious stories we have of, you know, individuals walking in water, but I'm just showing you in the real world, it's something that can be done. So the point I'm making is that we are high people. Never separate yourself from the heights that you carry. There is more in the unseen world than in the seen world. Just like they say, more than meets the eye, there's much more than what is meeting your eyes. What meets your eyes is what you see, what you don't see. Right where you are sitting down, they have other beings around you that are radiating at a different frequency, so they are quote unquote invisible. Come on, man, don't lose it on me now. They are beings, your ancestors. When you forget about them, or you're not into them no more. Your ancestors, so where you think they are. This ain't no ghost business. Your ancestors, their energy, their frequency, unseen particles are around you that you can communicate with. So there is a reality in that science of the unseen. And listen, before we go too far here, because I see I'm getting, you know what I mean, getting in the groove. I'll just talk all night long. I just want to make sure I have something here I want you to listen to before I get into any deep reasoning here on the subject area. Okay. Now, as I said, we're directly dealing with the tarot cards, and we're gonna touch this one here for the moment.
Last year, I purchased my first tarot deck, and as someone who gets anxiety when it comes to making decisions, I found the endless options of decks to be overwhelming. I mean, there's a deck in almost every theme imaginable. How could I know if the Pagan Cats deck was as legitimate as the classic Marseille deck? And anyway, was the Marseille deck even the original? I wanted to know more about the history, and I found that the narratives surrounding tarot's origins are many.